music would be, I guess. This is where the intro music would be. Da-na-na-na-na-na. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in, and welcome to my first episode of Beating Cancer Today. Who am I? I'm just a regular guy. I'm not a doctor. I have no education in science or biology or medicine in any sort of way. I'm not trained in cancer or anything like that. I'm just a regular guy who in 2019, I was diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer. And after 3 years of treatment, I decided, I didn't decide. The doctors decided that they did everything that they could do, and they put a pause in my treatment, and they told me to go home and kind of recollect things. And it was at that time that I kind of took matters into my own hands. And this is that story, pretty much. My prognosis was, after 3 years, I had reached my lifetime max of chemo, nonstop chemo and radiation, with no significant break in between. Most of the time, I was at the same time, actually. With that being said, they reached their lifetime max. It got to the point where they only had a couple treatments left, and they wanted to kind of save them for quality of life at end of life. And they sent me home to die, pretty much. Kind of a wait and see situation, and I wasn't really willing to wait and see. I kind of had like 30 days to make a decision as to whether I was going to live or die. They stopped my treatment. They told me I wouldn't live long after that. And, so I went ahead and I started doing a little bit of research. That was the treatment and the prognosis, and it just wasn't good. The prognosis was, we're just going to leave it in God's hands, and that's probably the best thing that could have happened, really, because it ended up being in God's hands. And, as all things, we ended up being. So this is kind of one of the things that I wanted to do in retrospect, looking back on my journey through cancer. And I have since they stopped my treatment, I have reached kind of a comfortable level of no evidence of disease results in my scans. For the last 16 months, I've been no evidence of disease, and I've been in the process of building back a better Kevin. And this is actually, one of those milestones of doing that is to create a broadcast system on a huge platform that it could reach other people, to let them know that, you're living, you're watching this, and where there's hope, there's life. So you just got to remember that. You got to remember that. And so my intention is to do an episode every Thursday at noon. And we're going to go ahead and try to build this audience. So if you guys can share it with all of your friends and have those friends, ask them to share it with their friends. It's just going to build the audience, and hopefully, this message, the content of this, will get to the right person, even if it's just one person. Hopefully it's going to get to the right person, and we may start saving some lives here. All right. So at the end of my treatment, I'll just get right back into the story. I'm going to kind of gloss over the cancer part, only to say that I had cancer, and they exhausted all their efforts, and not to say anything. I got treated at Moffitt in Tampa, and not to say anything negative. Those doctors kept me alive. The surgeons, the medical oncologists, the radiation oncologists, they kept me alive, and they were great. Absolutely terrific. No complaints. The bedside med, everything was perfect. They were fantastic. From the medical technicians all the way up to the surgical chief, everybody was great there. So I have no qualms. This is not a broadcast so I could start slaying Western medicine. That's not it. It kept me alive, and I have no qualms. And I'm so very grateful for everything that they did for me. So let's not even dabble on that. So I kind of glossed through the cancer thing. We'll circle back. But at the end of it all, they gave me a very grim prognosis. I had a month or so to live, pretty much. And it was in that time that when they kind of told me they were stopping treatment and threw their hands up and said, good luck to you. I was on my drive home, and I called my sister, and we conferenced with my other sister, and I'm on the way home, and my sister says, there's this guy in church that I heard he was doing some alternative medicine, and he had colon cancer, and the colon cancer spread to a liver, but he had no chemo to speak of. He had like one treatment and no chemo to speak of, and he's jumped into this alternative medicine. And the kicker of it was, she heard word through her church, and just to let you know, this is a spiritually based, I should say, broadcast. I try to keep things positive. I'm not a Bible chucker or anything. I believe in what I believe in. And you know what? After I tell this story, you're going to believe in what you believe in too. No doubt, God saved me. Nothing else. Okay? But having said that, it's like the person who was drowning, and he was a devout Catholic, and he said, I know that God's going to save me. And, a cruise ship comes by, and he's drowning in the ocean. And he says, no, cruise ship, you could keep going. I know God's going to save me. And then a shrimper comes by, and you say, hey, you're drowning. Let me save you. No, shrimper, you keep going. God's going to save me. A helicopter comes by, gets as low as he can, throws him a ladder. No, God's going to save me. He ends up drowning, and he goes to heaven, and he asks God, he says, why? I believed everything you did. I served you well. Why didn't you save me? I was drowning. And God said, hey man, I sent you three rescues, and you turned them all down. And so I guess I kind of said that so I could say this. God is present in all sorts of ways, and a life jacket comes in all sorts of fashions. And in this particular case, it came to me through a guy who just so happened to be creative enough to expand my horizons. And that guy is actually Brent, and he knows who he is. So anyway, my wife tells me, there's this guy at church that she heard through. He's married to a veterinarian, and he decided to take this alternative medicine, and that medicine is fenbendazole. It's an equestrian dewormer, so made by Merck. And this fenbendazole, he didn't do any chemo, and it seemed to be working for him. And in a moment of desperation, we're on three-way with my other sister, and my other sister says, hey, listen, you're crazy. Everybody on this telephone call is crazy, and you shouldn't entertain this at all. But I get home, and as I continue to drive home, rather, I'm like, I'm in a moment of desperation, which a lot of people who are probably watching this either are or know somebody who is in that moment, and hopefully this reaches you guys. So I'm on we get further down south, miles are going during the conversation. I'm going further south, heading back to my home in Marco Island. And I said, hey, you got that guy's phone number? It doesn't seem so crazy. I'm getting closer to home, and time's ticking, and I'll never get that last 40 miles back. So do you have the guy's phone number? She gives me the phone number, and I call him up, and the guy says, hey, listen, I'm on the roof right now. I'm swinging a hammer. I'm on the roof. And I just said, can I call you back? I can't hear you. And I hang up with him, and he's going to call me back. And I called my sister. I'm like, man, this guy is on the roof. I'm barely strong enough to steer my truck. I'm on I-75 driving south, and I'm so weak, I'm barely strong enough to steer my truck. The guy's on a roof swinging a hammer, laying tile. Yeah, I can't wait for this guy to call me back. So while I'm waiting for him, and he does, he calls me back, and I start talking to him. He's like, listen, I started doing this fenbendazole. My wife is a veterinarian, and she says that, there's really no side effects, and there's no downside to taking this, right? So, I started kind of doing a little bit of research or whatever, and it's kind of pondering in my mind. But that's kind of where that ended. The conversation ended. I ended up getting home. I had the conversation with my wife, and she thinks it's crazy. I think it's crazy. We all agree that it's crazy, but then we go to sleep. The next day, in my mind, I only got like 29 days. I'll never get that day back. I'll never get that day back. And is that still a crazy idea? Yeah, it's still a crazy idea. It's still a crazy idea, no matter how many days, or what the situation is. So I ended up, we had a house under construction, and I wanted to go meet some contractors. So I was on my way to go meet the contractors, and while I'm going, it was like unseasonably ridiculous traffic, and I end up, with all these, northerners that are down south driving in different climate or whatever. It's a tough traffic pattern, and everybody is kind of cramming into one lane, and they're pushing me over to the point where I'm trying to avoid a collision, and I get pushed over into the left turn lane. Well, that's not the lane that I want to be in. I want to go straight. But at this particular moment, at this particular time, it was easier just for me to go into the left lane, avoid damaging anybody's vehicle or my own. So I just went left. And in order to get back on track, I had to do a U-turn in a buddy of mine's business. Sorry. So a buddy of mine, I haven't seen him in like 10 years, and to be honest with you, as a guy who was a very abrasive fellow back in the day, he was, as all of us, like, young and full of piss and vinegar, and he was just a guy who had a lot of anger and energy and everything else, right? So this guy has cameras all over his property, and I'm about to use his driveway, his business parking lot, to do a U-turn. So I'm thinking, you know what? He's always been a good dude. I don't want him to see me on video camera and say, my name's written all over my car. So I don't want him to look and see that I'm, just passing through and ignoring him. Right? So I stopped to kind of save face, and I'm kind of in a rut. And my dad always told me, Kevin, the only difference between a rut and a grave is 6 feet. So I'm in a rut, and I'll be darned if I'm not going to get to that grave, right? So I stop, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm trying to put some positive stuff in my life. Maybe he's a negative person, and I don't want to be in a conversation with him. But you know what? Maybe he's not. And I'm here for him. I got pushed into this parking lot, I'm here, so I might as well just save face and go, right? So I go in, he's actually there, he welcomes me in, and he's just a breath of fresh air, and he starts talking to me, and while we're talking, he says, hey, Kevin, you look terrible, and I say, I don't know if you heard, I haven't seen you in a long time, but I'm sick, and, they kind of sent me home. So we're just kind of waiting to see what happens. And he says, well, that kind of sounds like a death sentence. And I said, well, here's that negative stuff. Got to keep it out. No, we're just kind of seeing what happens. So lo and behold, the guy turns in his desk. His whole office is rich and leather-bound books and smells of mahogany. It's one of those offices, ritzy, and he's in this big leather chair, and he's rocking back and forth, and a big old desk, like presidential, and he's rocking back and forth, and he reaches down, and he opens his drawer, and he pulls out a big old equestrian tube of fenbendazole, a big old horse syringe tube of fenbendazole. He said, listen, my friend was misdiagnosed with esophageal cancer about a year ago, and I was in Tractor Supply, and I ended up buying this stuff for him, and I had it in my desk, and I was going to give it to him, and he calls me up, lo and behold, he got misdiagnosed. So it's been sitting in my desk for like a few months, and every time I go to throw it away, something tells me not to throw it away. Somebody's going to need this. He said, I've been saving this for you. Oh my God, I lost my breath, because this was the same drug that my sister had previously talked to me about that I thought was insane. And it's also the same drug that this guy who just got off the roof swinging a hammer was taking. So is it a coincidence that there was abnormal traffic that pushed me into the left hand that ultimately landed me into this guy's rich mahogany leather bound books smelling office? And this guy is not a guy who frequents Tractor Supply. He's a wealthy dude. You know, he's a guy with money. He's not to say that people with horses don't have money. I mean, I don't mean that. But he's kind of a Fifth Avenue guy, not so much a Ranches guy. You know, so a Yellowstone guy instead of a Fifth Avenue guy. You know, so he's really you know, he's big into cars. He's not into horses. So it was really weird that he would have this. And, you know, the more I thought about it, and the more, I literally watched this unfold right in front of my eyes. And there's no other explanation than it being God's plan. So I kind of took a leap of faith, and I started it. September 2nd, I started this cocktail. Well, I did more research, and I talked to a lot more people, a lot of survivors, what I'll call survivors. And those are people that are taking this that turned out to have good results. Now, granted, you don't hear the stories where people didn't have good results. You just don't hear. Maybe they don't survive, maybe they die, I don't know. But I know what's happening with me, and I know what's happening with the people that I speak to, and that is that this drug is working, and they're all different kinds of cancers. There's breast cancer, bone cancer, brain cancer, lung cancer, liver cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, rectum cancer, anal cancer, all different kinds of cancers that I personally know the story of. You know, with these other survivors that I've shared this little cocktail with. So I don't know. I don't know. I have to say that this is, you know, God put fenbendazole into my life. There's no doubt about it. And I'm not a Bible thumper. I'm not going to preach to anybody about Bible verses. I don't know any. But I know my personal experience. And my personal experience will tell you all day long that this is God's favor. So pay attention to it. And that's all I'm going to say about religion. I don't really get into a whole lot of religion. But I feel like if we keep this broadcast somewhat spiritually based, it'll keep a center line so we don't sway too far from the positive message that I'm trying to send. So I operate under the spirit of religion, not so much the letter of religion, because I don't know. I didn't study theology. I didn't study the Bible. I didn't, you know, so I don't know the things that a lot of other people know. And I do welcome for anybody to share these things with me, but it's not what this is really about. This is about all the things that you need to be aware of, you know, as your own advocate, you know, and being your own advocate is a huge way to survive this battle. So, excuse me. So I'm just going to, now that you know the story, I'll give you the ingredients. My little experience, right? And I took into account Joe Tippin's protocol. I took into account, and it's pretty much all based on the same core principle and the same core drug, really, fenbendazole. I take fenbendazole because it's an anti-parasitic drug. I believe, and it's been theorized, that cancer is parasitic. And so, bada bing, bada boom. It just kind of made sense to me. Listen, I don't know anything about medicine or cancer or science or biology or whatever. All I know is that what did I have to lose? I only had a couple months or a month or a few weeks at that point, whatever it was, whatever God had left me time to have, it was ticking, so I didn't really have much to lose. At this time, I had already lost like 100 pounds and I had no strength. I had to hold on to stuff to walk. And you know what? It was just not cool. So I took a leap of faith and I started this fenbendazole-based cocktail that I call it cocktail because it's made up of 5 different over-the-counter things that you could get on Amazon or whatever. I'll post it on this, what is it, a news feed or whatever. I'll post. I'm not a very big tech guy or social media guy. So thank you for the people that helped me set this up. Jackie, Dick, Purton, my wife, Molly. Just thank you guys. Donna, thank you guys for helping me set this up because I really wanted to get this message out. So now that you got the story and how it came to me, and it certainly in my eyes was God's will, you need to know the ingredients. Fenbendazole. Fenbendazole is the #1 main ingredient, obviously, because it's an anti-parasitic. AHCC, active hectose correlated compound, it's a combination of mushrooms that is supposed to maximize your immune system. You should know that the whole time I've been taking this, I've never gotten sick. I've never gotten COVID. My wife had COVID. I didn't have COVID. I had no immune system, because I was a cancer patient. I never got COVID, Cimetidine. Cimetidine is the active ingredient found in Tagamet. And cimetidine is actually been known to, well, I'm going to save the clinical trials for you at the end of this, right? So cimetidine is the active ingredient in Tagamet, and curcumin is another one, and the last ingredient is annatto. Annatto is a specific part of vitamin E that complements the fenbendazole, which is the anti-parasitic. Now, keep in mind, all of these drugs that I just gave you, right, the 5 drugs, and I'm going to put it in the storyline here as soon as I figure out the technical part of this. All right, fenbendazole, active hectose correlated compound, cimetidine, curcumin, and annatto, ANNOTTA. Those are the 5 drugs, if I can put my hand up right. 5 drugs that are the ingredients of this cocktail. All right, you can buy them all over the counter on Amazon. Okay, all of these drugs historically had a clinical trial from a major research institution or a major hospital, MD Anderson, Sloan Kettering, Moffitt, Mayo Clinic, John Hoskins. So all of these main institutions have done clinical trials on these and published the studies, which I will also put readily accessible on this storyline here. So that's what this whole entire broadcast is going to be about. And I'm going to do it every Thursday, and I'm going to do it at noon. Hopefully every episode will post to the storyline also. So if you miss it live, you can catch it later. All right. The purpose of this broadcast is to explore alternatives. Listen, I came up with something that I thought was going to work, that was logical to me, not because it was scientifically proven. Like it was not a science thing for me. it was logical to me. I mean, it's been told that cancer's parasitic. This is an anti-parasitic. It just kind of seemed logical to me, you know. So the stuff that I came up with was logical, and it seems to be working for me. And it seems to be working for, I don't know, probably about another 100 people that I've shared it with. It's been working for them. So that's why I decided to do this broadcast. Yes, the 5 ingredients again, and I will also post it again on my storyline. Fenbendazole, made by Merck. Don't get fenbendazole made by somebody else. Merck is a reputable company. Get it by them. Active hectose correlated compound. You'll see it abbreviated AHCC. That's the second ingredient. Cimetidine. It's the active ingredient in Tagamet. Okay. Curcumin. Curcumin. I don't have the company that I get it with, but I get it on Amazon, and I'll put it on the thing. And last but not least, it's a vitamin E supplement, Annata. Annata is actually a specific part of the vitamin E. The vitamin E is comprised of 2 different things. This is the specific part that you need that complements the fenbendazole. So those are the 5 ingredients. I hope I answered that question that just popped up on my screen. Listen, there's not going to be too much negativity on here. We're going to talk about controversy. We're going to talk about the medical world. We're going to talk about how I think there is a cure, and for some reason, it's not being shared. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but I'm not going to stray too far from that center line. All right, we need to maintain spiritual. We need to maintain positivity, because the number one reason why I have survived this battle up to this point is because of the people that I surround myself with. And God bless her, my wife has filtered and put an umbrella over my head, sheltered me from any negativity for the past 4 years. I couldn't watch the news. I couldn't do anything. She has made it so I didn't have any negative stuff in my life. And that, coupled with the positivity that the rest of my circle brought, all my other family members and stuff, that positivity, it was never combated with negativity. So if we eliminate the negativity, then your support system is solid, and your chances of surviving this battle are that much greater. So we got to maintain positive dialogue, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to tell you the truth. You got to build your strength. You got to maintain your strength and keep your weight up for the battle. We're going to talk about that. And because if you start losing weight, you're going to start losing strength. You're going to lose your battle. I don't want anybody here to lose their battle. This is to promote winning your battle. Hence the positivity stuff, right? Your recovery. Don't take it for granted. This is the last thing I'm going to touch on before I plug it for next week again at noon on Thursday. Please, 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 please share it with your friends and ask them to share it with their friends, because somebody's got to have a brother, sister, cousin, uncle, son, daughter, nephew, aunt, mother, father. Somebody knows somebody with cancer. And if you know somebody with cancer, they got to see this. If you know somebody who knows somebody with cancer, they got to see this so they can tell somebody else. But the last thing that I'm going to touch on is your recovery. I don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Can't. I have to treat every single person that I encounter like they're my purpose, because God gave this gift today to me. And every single person that I encounter I have to think of them as my purpose, because if I don't, I could be that old Kevin who was kind of a jerk, you know. And if I'm a jerk to that person and they are my purpose, well, what did God give me today for if I'm just blowing my purposes? You know, God gave me today. So with that, I'm going to give you this. This is my rebuilding a better me, because that's how I repay God. So I'm going to earn my spot right here on earth. I know my spot in heaven's secure. I'm going to earn my spot here on earth, and by doing that, I'm paying it forward. All right. And so when you do get to the point of recovery, make sure you rebuild a better you. Rebuilding a better you. And that's the end of this episode. That was the first episode of Beating Cancer Today. I can't wait till next episode. Next episode, we're going to talk about something a little bit controversial. But I have a feeling that I'm going to field a lot of questions about this cocktail and the fenbendazole based products. If you have questions, hit me with a DM or hit me, is that what they call it? Email me. I also have an email. The email is beatingcancertoday@gmail.com. Hit me on the email, beatingcancertoday@gmail.com. beatingcancertoday@gmail.com. Or hit me on Facebook. Give me a message on here, and I'll answer all your questions. And in fact, I'll incorporate them into the next episode if I get them on time. Okay? Hey, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please, please, please share this with everybody you can.